Well, David, I think we can kick things off.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Data-Driven HR Organization. My name is Dave Baroy. I'm the organizer for today's webinar. And our presenter today is Don Farber. He's the Vice President of Vineyardsoft Corporation. Don's got over 25 years of experience in front office and back office software. And he has, over the past 10 years, Don has been a leading spokesperson for the value of business activity monitoring. And in 2011, also published an ROI calculator on operational business intelligence. So without further ado, Don, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Dave. I appreciate the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for spending some time with me. As David introduced me, I am indeed Don Farber with Vineyardsoft, and we're going to take today's time spending somewhere between about 45 minutes to at most 60, and we're going to talk about the data-driven organization and an underlying technology that you can consider adopting to help you become more data-driven. Today's session is going to be broken up into about 3 parts. The first 15 to 20 minutes will be an overview of what it means to become data-driven and some of the steps that you can take to initiate that process. Following that, we will jump into an underlying technology that helps an organization become data-driven. That section will also take about 15 to 17 or 18 minutes as we look at that technology. And then finally, we'll leave certainly the last 15 or 20 minutes for any additional discussion or questions that anyone might have. And so without any further introduction, let's kick this off. Now, I do need to make a quick disclaimer, and that is, as I tend to go through my presentation, every few minutes I'll grab myself a quick sip of water. So if you find a few seconds of silence coming through the phone, that's just me grabbing a quick drink. I'd like to start by asking you to consider the following question. In your daily HR business activities, have you ever felt like saying, or have you ever found yourself saying, when did that happen? Such as, when did that employee rack up so much overtime and get way over our allowable monthly limit? Or when did this employee accrue so much absenteeism or sick time? Who let their vacation go negative? Or for that matter, when did that particular employee fail their drug test, and what did we do about it? Well, if you're asking those sorts of questions, even once a day or once a week, you certainly have a need to become more data-driven. Because a data-driven organization is one in which your HR, your human resource data, proactively comes to you. I like to use the image of your HR application actually tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, this requires your attention, and this requires some action that will enable your HR organization to provide a better level of service to your organization as a whole. Now, interestingly enough, if you tend to look at a lot of executives or managers' desks, what you find is that their desks are typically piled high with reports, absenteeism reports, employee performance reviews, all sorts of reports. And I tend to use the analogy of the delivering of haystacks of information. Typically, if you've got 10, 20, 50, 100 pages of reports, only perhaps 5 or 6% of that, sometimes at most, is actually really valuable, actionable information. And so stop looking through those haystacks of information for the occasional needles, and yet have those needles, those nuggets of information, automatically delivered to you. We sort of need to reverse the process that most organizations follow today. And so becoming data-driven actually gives rise to something called giving a voice to your data. And again, I'd like to use that analogy of your Sage Abra or Sage HRMS system kind of reaching out and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, this particular employee has experienced this. This condition has occurred. This task has not been done. This threshold has been reached, or we're getting awfully close to it. To be able to be proactively told about those conditions, then you can identify them and act on them in a more timely, efficient manner. So I've used the analogy now a couple of times of your Abra or Sage HRMS data tapping you on the shoulder. Good analogy, but what might my HRMS data or application want to say to me? Well, there's some examples here, and I've already mentioned a few about an employee racking up an undue amount of sick time or a particular employee who's failed a drug test. In fact, from surveying literally thousands of HR organizations, we're able to identify 8 basic types of HR-related business activities under which you would want to empower your HR solution to come to you, to talk to you. First and foremost among those conditions are date-sensitive conditions. I want to know about a certification that's about to expire. I need to know about an employee whose review is coming up in a certain number of days. Approaching thresholds, whether it's sick time, absenteeism, overtime. You know, there are a lot of solutions out there that let you know when a threshold has been surpassed, but for my money, I want to know before a threshold is surpassed. I want to know when we're 5, 10, or 15% away from reaching that threshold, so I'm able to prevent something bad from occurring instead of reacting to it. Number 3 on this list happens to be one of my favorites, because typically when an organization talks about monitoring their data, monitoring their employees' activities, you're looking for things that have happened. An employee who has failed a drug test, an employee who has racked up more than a certain number of hours of sick time or absenteeism. What a lot of organizations fail to think about, but again, for my money is almost at least as valuable, is identifying and responding to things that have not happened. A pending hire whose paperwork has not yet been reviewed or approved, a pending pay raise or employee review that has not been done or has not taken effect. Sometimes it is truly those things that have not happened that are every bit as important to know about as those things that have. Now, I want to take a couple of moments to pause on number 4, exceptions. Because chances are that your organization, like most HR organizations today, already performs some degree of exception management, a very popular topic in the HR world these days. Chances are that you already have analytical HR reports that it's the responsibility of one or more people within your organization to run on a frequent basis, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly. Perhaps that person has the job of submitting those reports, taking them off the printer, and then sneaker mailing them down to the appropriate offices or cubicles of the people who need to review them. And then, of course, you end up waiting for the desk on which you put that report to be reviewed, and so the person who reviewed it can figure out the appropriate action to take. That is the holy trinity, if you will, of the exception management process. Now, data-driven puts a very simple twist on that 3-step process. And if you look at the box highlighted on the right side of the current slide, you'll notice that the steps are all the same with one important difference, the words auto in front of all 3 of these. Auto monitor, auto deliver, and auto execute or auto respond to the condition that has occurred. This is truly enabling your HR organization to become data-driven when the data itself identifies and acts on the business conditions that are important to the success of your HR department and your organization as a whole. Let's continue now with the other 4 very typical business conditions under which you'd want your Sage Abra or HRMS system to speak to you. Rooting out bad data. You know, we've all heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. The more that you can do to improve the quality of the data that goes into your HR system, looking for phone numbers, missing digits, looking for invalid data, etc., certainly the more value you'll get out of it. Trend analysis. You know, it's quite interesting to me that when people start to think about monitoring their HR data and identifying business conditions like sick time, failed drug tests, excessive overtime, etc., people tend to think about very simple conditions. But technology has advanced a lot these days. How about automatically looking for trend analysis? An automated process whereby at the end of every month, your HRMS system looks at itself and says, hey, we've got an employee who racked up significantly more absenteeism hours or more overtime hours this month than last month, or this month versus the previous 6 months' monthly average. Number 7, data inconsistencies. You know, if we've got a new employee who after a month has been absent more than X number of hours, that's kind of odd. Are they not happy with their position? And finally, number 8 on this list, and perhaps the most important thing to monitor in the HR world, is to know when certain absolutely critical pieces of information about your employees and their activities have changed. Has an employee changed their benefits, their 401k enrollment status? Has an employee's position been changed? Has their salary been changed? If so, when was that change made? Who made it? What was it changed from and to? You know, especially in today's world where organizations are being tasked with being compliant. Compliancy rules that range from Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX, to very specific, industry-specific rule sets. When data changes, it's really important that you have an audit trail. So, in order to enable an organization to become more data-driven, you do need to adapt an underlying technology. And that technology, as if this industry needed yet another acronym, of course, has its own. Business Activity Monitoring, or BAM, is really a marriage of the 4 capabilities that you see listed on this slide. And again, you can put auto in front of each of these components. The automated monitoring of employee and HR-related activities, and when certain activities occur or fail to occur, the delivery of that information to the right people, including the right information, whether it's an employee performance report, review form, etc., and the automated responding to that condition or that activity, once again, in an automated fashion. So let's consider a sample or perhaps somewhat typical activity that can take place in the HR world. And I'm just going to take a look. I've got a little flashing message here. I want to make sure everything is okay. All right, so I see we've got some folks who are going to be asking questions. Thank you very much for submitting those. And I should have mentioned at the start of my talk, we're going to collect all of these at the end of my time, and I will go through them one at a time. So thank you very much for using the chat box to send in those questions. Okay, so let's say that you've got an organizational policy that says that no employee can record more than 50 hours of overtime in a given month. And boy, that's a heck of a lot of OT. Now here we are about 2/3 or 3/4 the way through the month of April. You might have an employee who's already racked up 35, 40 or more hours of overtime, but you don't know about it. Why? Because you have no way during the month to monitor accrued overtime, and so you're only able to report on it at the end of the month. So we do wait another 4 or 5 days. The end of April rolls around. You run your overtime analysis report, and you find out that a given employee, holy cow, has racked up 60, 65, 70 or more hours of overtime. Your policy that no one can accrue more than 50 hours on any given month isn't worth the paper it's written on, and now you're faced with having to come up with the money to pay off this employee's excessive overtime, and that's not an enjoyable position to be put in. So what can you do to address that? Well, number one, as soon as an employee starts accruing overtime at a rate that looks likely for them to exceed a certain acceptable monthly limit, notify them. Notify the manager, even notify the finance department. Once an employee gets close to that maximum or perhaps reaches it, automatically notify the customer that they will not get paid for any additional overtime accrued that month, and even go back into your Sage Abra or HRMS system and change that employee's status so that they cannot record any additional overtime during that month. Instead of waiting for the end of the month for someone to manually run that overtime analysis report, have that report automatically triggered whenever any employee's overtime looks likely to exceed the monthly limit, and have that report automatically delivered to the departmental manager, to your HR manager, to your finance department, etc. That is the type of automated processing and data-driven capabilities that are provided through the solution called Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow. We tend to refer to it simply as Alerts and Workflow. Now, what Alerts and Workflow really offers you are 2 very specific things. Number one, an automated monitoring of HR-related business activities to give you a greater awareness of what's going on with your employees and within your organization as a whole, along with automated monitoring and communications of those activities or conditions so you're able to know about them and respond to them in a faster manner. Now, Alerts and Workflow has been around for over 13 years now. It's in use by over 9,000 organizations worldwide, which make it the most widely used business activity monitoring or Alerts and Workflow solution on the market today. It's been the recipient of numerous awards and commendations, and the organization known as Forbes, who know a thing or two about business, 2 years running, have given Alerts and Workflow their award for top productivity enhancing tool. So let's drill down a little bit further into Alerts and Workflow and find out what it's all about. It starts out by automatically monitoring your Sage Abra or Sage HRMS solution for any business conditions or activities that are important to you. And that statement bears repeating. Any business conditions or activities that are important to you, whether it's new hires, terminations, drug test results, certifications about to expire. Any business condition can be identified and automatically responded to by Alerts and Workflow. But although we're certainly focusing our conversation today on HR, it's worth mentioning, that this solution is an enterprise-wide monitoring and response technology because, when it comes to monitoring employee performance and activities, sometimes those activities and that performance can be reflected by their work in other parts of your business. I mean, in truth, just how well can you identify and monitor how well a salesperson or a customer support rep is performing in your organization if you're not also able to monitor their performance in those applications? So Alerts and Workflow, although it starts out by monitoring your Sage Abra or HRMS system, can also monitor the activities, conditions in your other business applications, whether it's an accounting system, such as an ERP application, whether it's monitoring activities within a sales system or customer service system, or even monitoring conditions within your own business applications. And since we are talking about looking at all employee-related activities, that certainly includes monitoring the activities or the information that's coming into your organization through email. The HR part of an organization receives a lot of email from prospective hires, from personnel agencies, from service providers, benefits administrators, etc. If you're getting emails from one or more of those sources, I always like to ask, whose job is it to monitor those incoming emails, to see who they're from, what they're about, and to automatically respond to them? If that's a job that's being done primarily manually these days, I'd certainly encourage you to automate that monitoring and response of incoming emails through a data-driven technology like Alerts and Workflow. And a couple moments ago, I was talking about Alerts and Workflow as an enterprise-wide solution, not just monitoring employee activities in your Sage HRMS system, but also monitoring sales activities or customer service activities. Well, how about monitoring activities between your Sage Abra or Sage HRMS system and also a sales system? For example, if you've got a sales force and one of your sales reps happens to record a whole lot more absenteeism for the current month, April, versus March, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And just by looking at HR, you really can't tell because this person's success is really reflected in your sales or CRM application. So let's see if this particular employee, if their sales numbers have taken a dip during April now that they've been absent more often. Or is it just that this employee is now working at home and is actually getting even more work done than usual, and actually their sales numbers have gone up? Enterprise awareness is the only way that you can really find out what's best for your employees. Now, Sage Alerts and Workflow also will monitor such aspects of your business as your operating system. You ever have one of your employees who let their Microsoft Outlook or Exchange mailbox fill up so that no one else could send them emails? That's certainly going to affect productivity. And when you're talking about delivering needed information to people, such as an employee review form, drug testing paperwork, etc., that information is only as valuable as its ability to reach its intended recipient. So Alerts and Workflow can not only deliver this information, but it can actually make sure that those deliveries have successfully reached their intended recipients. Because I know when I was in HR, the last thing I liked to hear from an employee when they came into my HR department was, hey, Don, I never received that document. So that's awfully nice to know. Now, Alerts and Workflow can send out information via a wide variety of methods, including email, faxing, text messaging to a cell phone, web dashboard, etc. And all of these alert delivery methods are included as part of the Alerts and Workflow solution. We often get asked, what email systems does Alerts and Workflow support? It's a good question with an easy answer. All of them. Microsoft Outlook, Internet or SMTP mail, Lotus Notes mail, and even hosted mail systems like Gmail, Hotmail, and Yahoo Mail. Alerts and Workflow also has the ability to create web dashboards, whether they're just lists of certain activities or conditions that have been met, whether it's popping up messages through Screen Pop or Instant Message, or for that matter, even creating graphic alert dashboards that you can keep an eye on to get a quick picture of employee activities. Now, there are two final components of the Alerts and Workflow solution. The first of those is its ability to automatically generate and deliver relevant forms, documents, and reports. Again, ask yourself, how many HR reports do you generate on a weekly or monthly basis? Is it someone's job to run those and deliver them? If so, how much time could you save a month if all of that report generation and delivery was automated? But beyond that, aren't there some times where you're able to say, gee, if an employee has recorded more than X overtime or more than Y number of hours of sick time, I'd really like to generate this corresponding report and send it to that employee's manager. Well, the triggered generation of relative reports, forms, and documents is also supported through Alerts excuse me, and Workflow. Let me grab another quick sip of water, get this frog out of my throat. Alrighty, that's a bit better. So the final component in Alerts and Workflow is its ability to trigger updates. You know, if an employee does fail a drug test, let's not rely upon their manager or someone in HR to remember to go into our HR system and put that employee's status on probation, or whatever your appropriate status is for an employee who's failed their drug test. Let's have Workflow do that automatically. You know, there are a lot of conditions, a lot of scenarios in HR where you're able to say, if this happens, if an employee reaches this status, if an employee fails to do this, then I want my HRMS system to reflect X or Y or Z. In those if-then scenarios, those can be fully automated through Sage Alerts and Workflow. Before we take a look at the underlying application, it's certainly worth talking about licensing and pricing, because no matter how good a solution sounds, it's no good if you can't afford it. And I think you'll find Alerts and Workflow refreshingly affordable. Starting off at the top of this window, first thing to mention is that Alerts and Workflow is not licensed per user. It doesn't matter how many employees you have in your organization. It doesn't matter how many people you wish to notify or how many business conditions you want to monitor. Starting off at the top, let's say that you want to monitor your Sage Abra or Sage HRMS system for an unlimited number of business conditions, employee activities, etc. You want to trigger alerts via email, fax, text message, cell phone, web dashboard, and you want to send those alerts to an unlimited number of people. You'd be looking at a one-time purchase cost of just under $1,800. Now, there are two optional components that you can choose from, the first of which is very, very popular. It is the ability to also automatically generate and deliver relevant forms, documents, crystal reports, as well as graphic alerts, bar charts, pie charts, line charts, etc. That module by itself is a one-time cost of just under $1,000. And then there is the Actions or Workflow module, the ability to automatically respond to the conditions that occurred, such as if an employee fails a drug test, I need to change that employee's status to on probation. That module also by itself is a one-time cost of just under $1,000. But we've talked about how Alerts and Workflow can monitor data outside of your Sage Abra or Sage HRMS solution. And so you might say, you know, I've got this sales or CRM application, I'd like to monitor it as well. How much to do that? Well, it's an additional $17.99 for each additional application to be monitored. But you can't possibly spend just under $8,700 for what we call the unlimited monitoring license of alerts and workflow, which would enable you to monitor an unlimited number of business applications within your organization, also monitor your operating system, monitor an unlimited quantity of incoming email, and trigger alerts, reports, and workflow altogether for $86.95. So before we jump into the application to have a look at it, let me mention that about a year and a half ago, we did a survey of our customer base. We actually got results from roughly 1,100 customers. We asked them to tell us what the top 6 benefits they were realizing from their implementation of Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow is. These were their top 6 answers. However, we also asked them one more question. We actually gave these customers a return on investment calculator. And this is a calculator that you can download yourself and put your own numbers in, because we wanted to calculate, based upon how customers were using alerts and workflow, how long did it take them to pay off their investment. And that investment was defined as the cost of software as well as any implementation services. And the answer turned out to be 88 days, just under 3 months to completely pay off their investment in alerts and workflow. So enough talking about it. Let's actually see it. So I'm going to bring up now the Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow solution. A couple of words in general about this technology. Number one, alerts and workflow is what's referred to as a server-based application. That means it's typically installed just on a single machine within your organization's IT environment. Alerts and workflow does not need a dedicated server. You could put it on your ABRA or HRMS server. You could put it on your SQL Server box, on your Exchange server. Doesn't matter. You can even run it on a workstation. Alerts and workflow runs under any Windows-based operating system, whether that's NT, XP, Vista, 2008, doesn't matter. And alerts and workflow stores its own data under one of 3 different database formats. We give you your choice between Microsoft SQL Server, SQL Express, which is a free download from Microsoft, and even Microsoft Access. And there's no difference in licensing, pricing, or functionality based upon any of those selections. Now, let's go and take a look at what alerts and workflow can do for our Sage ABRA or Sage HRMS solution. Now, I want to point out that in this particular case, my implementation of alerts and workflow, I'm having it monitor more than just Sage HRMS. You can see I'm having it monitor my sales or CRM application. I'm having it monitor a number of different aspects of my accounting system. And most importantly for our discussion today, I have alerts and workflow monitoring a number of different business conditions within my Sage ABRA or HRMS system. It's important to note that alerts and workflow runs in a lights-out processing environment. Technically speaking, it runs as what's called a Windows service, but in good old-fashioned plain English, it means that once you tell alerts and workflow about the various business conditions that you want it to check for, and once you turn it on, it simply runs automatically, periodically checking for these different conditions, triggering alerts and workflow and form and document and report generation as needed, but no person needs to be logged into alerts and workflow. And in fact, typically, only 1 or 2 people within your organization are trained on the solution, as they're going to be the people responsible for the configuration, customization, or maintenance of these events. I should also mention that out of the box, alerts and workflow ships with roughly 50, that's 50, pre-configured business conditions for monitoring in Sage ABRA or Sage HRMS, and that includes all of the events that you see here. You can use these events, you can customize them, and you can also create an unlimited number of additional events of your own. Let's drill down into one of these events so you can get a sense for how an event is configured and can be customized in alerts and workflows. So let's take a look at expirations of certifications. That sounds good to me. My employees have to be certified in certain skill sets. Those certifications need to be renewed on a periodic basis. Now, every event has up to 5 components, which you can see here. The first of those components is telling me how often the event is scheduled to run. This event is scheduled to be checked every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. Those employee or business conditions that are very time sensitive, you might need to check those every hour or every half an hour, maybe even continuously or every few minutes. And certainly those conditions that are less time critical can be checked on a less frequent basis. Daily, weekly, monthly, the first or last day of the month, etc. Now, I'm going to drop down to the second component of an event because this is one that typically clients want to see more of. Referred to as an events query, this is what identifies the specific business condition that we want this event to check for. And if we drill down into this business condition, we can see that we are looking for any certifications that are due to expire within 30 days. You'll notice I actually have 3 events looking at expiring certifications, 30, 60, and 90 days. All of these events use this same query, but just have a different triggering threshold on the event level. Now, people always ask me, Don, how easy is it for me as a non-technical person to create these queries or to customize them? Let's say that I don't want to look at certain employees or certain certifications. Can I add that to the criteria of this query? The answer is most definitely yes, you can add that. You do not need to be a programmer in order to write or customize your own queries. You're not writing SQL syntax or anything even remotely like that. What you do need in order to create or customize your own queries is an understanding of the underlying application's database schema. In plain English, you need to know what data is stored where in a database. If you've ever written a crystal report for your Sage Abra or HRMS solution, you have all the expertise you need. Alerts and Workflow will automatically show you a list of all of the files or tables in our HR database. And for my purposes, we need to look at the table that stores employee certifications data, as well as our employee data itself, called the HR personnel table. If I choose more than one table, Alerts and Workflow has a little wizard to help me link or associate those tables with each other. But I'm going to stop next on the Columns tab. Here, Alerts and Workflow is going to show you a list of all of the fields of information that you can retrieve and analyze from the underlying database. So we've chosen fields like the certification code, the number of the employee assigned to or related to that certification code, when that certification code is due to expire, how much it costs, if there's a cost associated with it, etc. You can become very sophisticated in terms of the types of conditions you want to check for. Maybe I want to know if any employee has more than 3, 5, or 7 expiring certifications. I can simply tell Alerts and Workflow to count the number of certifications that are due to expire. Maybe I want to total up the cost of renewing all expiring certifications over the next 30, 60, or 90 days. I can do that as well simply by choosing the sum or summarize function. If I want to get even more sophisticated, if I want to calculate the number of days until a certification is due to expire, Alerts and Workflow provides a calculation wizard. Again, no programming necessary. I can just come down here and say, you know, I need to calculate the difference in days between 2 dates, perhaps between the current date and the expiration date of the certification. And again, a wizard will walk you through that process. But I'm going to stop next on the Filters tab, because here is where we're able to actually specify the conditions that I want Alerts and Workflow to check for. Since I want to look at certifications that are going to expire, my first condition says that my certification expiration date is not equal to blank. And everything here is available once again in plain English format in drop-down lists. My second condition is specifying that my certification's expiration date has got to be greater than the current date. I don't want to look at certifications that are already expired. And finally, my last filter is doing a calculation created using the wizard I showed you earlier. This is actually calculating the number of days until a certification is due to expire. Now, just in case we've got any programmatic types on the phone with us today, if there's nothing you like better than writing your own SQL code or stored procedure to identify database conditions, we'll actually show you a look under the covers, under the hood of Alerts and Workflow. We'll show you the actual code that's being executed. And if you like nothing better than to write your own, we'll even let you do so. Personally, I like showing people this tab because I don't know how to write this. And all of these preceding tabs is what enables me to get away with not being technical, but still have the ability to specify what conditions I want Alerts and Workflow to check for. Also, that includes identifying whenever any field in my ABRA or HRMS database has had its value changed. Okay, so we've identified the triggering condition. Now we need to specify what we want to do. What kind of automated response do we want to execute once that condition is found to have occurred? Well, first and foremost, I probably want to notify someone. How do I want to notify someone? Via email, fax, text message, screen pop, etc. These are all shown here as the event's deliverables. And you can cursor over any one of these branches and see the underlying alert message. If you wish to look at that message in more detail or edit it, customize it, simply a matter of double-clicking on the corresponding branch, and you're brought into that particular alert message in edit mode. Here we're editing the email alert message. All of the fields from my HRMS or ABRA database are presented to me. And I can construct my outgoing alert message however I want, in plain text or in HTML. If I'm sending an alert to a HR supervisor, and if I have 47 employee certifications that are about to expire, chances are that manager doesn't want to receive 47 separate emails. So in this particular case, I'm configuring a single email that says, here are all of the certifications that are due to expire within the next 30 days. Now, as I mentioned, these alerts can go out via other methods, including instant message, text message to a cell phone, fax, etc. But you know, if you've already got a nice certification expiration report for ABRA or HRMS, why bother reinventing the wheel? Why don't we just tell Alerts and Workflow to generate that particular report if I've got any certifications that are due to expire within 30 days, and let's tell Alerts and Workflow how that report is going to be formatted in PDF format, HTML, MS Word, Excel, your choice. And this is what we refer to as a triggered report, because if you notice down here at the bottom of this Reports tab, Alerts and Workflow is going to feed the report the IDs of only those employees who have certifications that are due to expire within the next 30 days. You'll notice that this particular event, in addition to having a report associated with it, also has a chart. And this is a new area of functionality in Alerts and Workflow, and that's the ability to generate graphic alerts. You know, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I can right away see that my staff member, Anderson, has the most certifications that are due to expire. And I can see where my other employees rank. And this graphic ability is included in Alerts and Workflow and can be sent along as part of an alert, whether in an email, in a web dashboard, or in a number of other formats. Okay, so we've identified the condition. We've identified what kind of content we want to send to people in our alerts. Clearly, the next step is to specify whom we want those alerts to be sent to. Referred to as subscribers in Sage Alerts and Workflow, this event has 3. Everyone in our executive team are being notified via not 1, not 2, but 3 methods: email, fax, and instant message. Trust me, you can really annoy the heck out of someone with this application if you put your mind to it. Myself, I'm satisfied with being notified via just 2 methods, email and instant message. But perhaps most importantly is the third and final alert recipient. You know, if an employee has certifications that are about to expire, probably the most important person for me to notify is the employee, him or herself. And that's what this final subscriber is, referred to as a dynamic subscriber, because clearly the person is going to depend upon the certification that's about to expire. Finally, and a purely optional component of this event, is its workflow actions. In addition to sending alerts, Do I want Alerts and Workflow to go back into my Sage Jabra or Sage HRMS system and actually update an employee's record? Do I perhaps want to generate an export file, maybe a comma-separated file of all coming certifications that are about to expire? Maybe I need to pull some data out of Sage HRMS and push it into some other application that I'm using. Or perhaps, now that my employees are more and more using social networking as communication tools, maybe I simply need to post, maybe via Twitter, a tweet that informs one or more people about certifications that are about to expire. Okay, so let's back ourselves up a little bit and talk about just a couple of other options, and then we'll begin to take Q&A. Alerts and Workflow, as I mentioned, includes about 50 or so pre-configured events that are monitored and responded to within the Sage Jabra or Sage HRMS system. That also includes a collection of alert dashboards as well. But very importantly, I also would like to point out an area of functionality called job streams. You know, perhaps no more so than anywhere else in an organization, the HR department is a place that has specific business processes that need to get followed in a very specific order. Just think about onboarding a new employee. The number of things that need to get done. We need to set up that person with an office or a cubicle. We need to drop a phone line or set up a phone set there. We need to get this person enrolled for health care, for our 401k program. We need to get them access to the business applications that our organization uses. You know, that's just the start of it. Well, Alerts and Workflow includes a process called job streams. And what it's really for is it's a place where you can set up and manage your multi-step business processes. So whether it's hiring a new employee, the process that needs to be followed when you're terminating an employee, when you're creating a capital expenditure for an employee to purchase a piece of equipment, Alerts and Workflow allows you to create these multi-step business processes. Each process can consist of up to 1,000 individual steps, and each step can be made dependent on the preceding steps or not, your choice. And very importantly, you can rearrange and insert steps as those business processes evolve, which they invariably do over time. And each of these steps can notify the appropriate people, whether it's someone in accounting, someone down in IT, or facilities management, etc. Okay. So I'd like to finish up before we take our Q&A by mentioning just a couple of last items. I do want to mention that we encourage you to download and try out Alerts and Workflow for free. You can visit the alertsandworkflow.com website and download the live shipping software along with the pre-configured events for use with either Sage Jabra or Sage HRMS. We work with both. As you're trying out the software, you have free access to our tech support department, our video training library, and any other materials that you might need. And let's see, I think now we're probably at a good time for me to start answering some of these questions. Dave, do you want to narrate them to me, or would you prefer that I just dive in on my own?
Sure, absolutely. First question was from Becky. She asked, how can it warn you of a pending hire not being reviewed? They would not be entered into the system. Is that correct?
Right. Well, the way Alerts and Workflow works is that it's going to look at data that's in the database. So obviously a pending hire or a pending review, that person needs to be in your Sage Jabra or HRMS data, even if they're there just as a prospective hire and not yet an employee. So one of the things, once that person is there, albeit they might not be hired yet, they might not have had their review yet, is that you can tell Alerts and Workflow to look at a prospective hire or a prospective review candidate and say, okay, this person is in the database, but how long has it been without any activity? So have no phone calls been made to them, have no appointments been set with them, has no follow-up been made to them, no offer letter been sent to them, etc. So depending upon how you wish to define nothing has been done with them, what that inactivity actually consists of, you can actually tell Alerts and Workflow, to look at this prospective hire, look at this prospective review candidate, and if nothing has happened, if no phone calls, no notes, no appointments, no offer letters have been sent, and Alerts and Workflow has a very specific way to look for no activity for a given employee, then it can trigger the appropriate alert to the appropriate people to say, hey, we've had this prospective hire in our database, for now 15 days, 30 days, 45 days. Nothing's been done. No one's followed up with them. And typically that alert would probably go to someone like the HR supervisor or manager. But clearly, that person, that prospective hire or prospective review candidate, they do need to be in the Sage Abra or Sage HRMS data, even if they're there not as a current employee, but just as a prospective or potential hire. So hopefully that answered that question.
And Becky followed up. She said, if entering pending new hires, can they be deleted if not hired?
Absolutely, they certainly can. This is one of those issues where it really varies based upon from organization to organization. Some organizations say, yeah, if they're not hired, I just want them gone and out of the system. And you can actually have Alerts and Workflow literally remove a record from the underlying database. But I have to say that's a little bit more of an exception than the rule. Most organizations, what they decide to do in such a case, if the conclusion is not to hire a new employee, they'll actually have Alerts and Workflow go back into that prospective hire's record and flag them as a not hire or as an abandoned candidate, but keep that record in the database for historical tracking purposes. So most people, the answer to your question is yes, that employee can be either deleted from the record or simply flagged or marked as a non-hire, depending upon whether you wish to retain that history.
Okay, and a few more from Becky here. Is Active Directory required? Can it work with eDirectory and or LDAP?
It can work with Active Directory. It can work with LDAP, and I will have to check on eDirectory for you. I actually don't know the answer to that question. But to just expand upon my answer, the people, users, any individual who you wish to notify, their information, their name, their email address, their text messaging or cell phone number, etc., that information can come from any table in any relational database. So whether you've got them stored in Sage HRMS or Abra, or maybe you've got them stored in a table in some other application or some other database, like a Microsoft Access database or an Excel spreadsheet as an example, Alerts and Workflow can dynamically actually read or retrieve that subscriber data from those sources as well.
Don, can it connect to a Sybase database via ODP, or ODB, I'm sorry?
It can. It can connect to a Sybase database. It would use ODBC, Open Database Connectivity would be the way to do so. We do indeed have a number of clients who are pulling data or monitoring data out of Sybase. So the answer is a very enthusiastic yes to that question.
Okay. And can you give us the minimum requirements as well as the site address to download the trial version again?
Absolutely, I certainly can. In fact, I can give you both all at once. I'm going to pop up a web browser, not because I'm going web surfing, but because I want to take you out to that site. We're going to go to Alerts and Workflow. Actually, let's go right here. Okay. So the actual website itself is www.alertsandworkflow, all spelled out as you can see it up at the top of my URL here, .com. From that page, you'll actually come in probably to the main page. You can drill down in the Sage Product tab to Sage HRMS or Sage Abra. You can drill down and actually get that list. I mentioned there's some 50 or so pre-configured business conditions. You can download to see what those are because you only saw about half of them or so, maybe 20 or so in the course of my demo. If you want to share the product demo with anyone else in your organization, you can also do that from here. But to answer your other question about requirements, actually what you can do is simply come to, let me just scroll down a little bit, come to the documentation page that you see here, and down under Technical Documents, you'll see the Alerts and Workflow Manual. Go ahead and download that. It is I believe it's either PDF or Microsoft Word. You know, off the top of my head, I can't actually remember. It is PDF. There we go. Nothing like a little context-sensitive help to help me along. If you download that manual, the first 2 or 3 pages, once you're past the table of contents, talk about hardware and software requirements. It's pretty minimal, so you'll be able to get that information from there. While we are here, I do want to point out also from this documentation page is where you can actually download and plug in your own numbers to the ROI calculator. As I said, that's the calculator that we use to derive that 88 days as average ROI based upon 1,000+ users. Also from this documentation page, you can also, if you or any of your colleagues kind of want to dive into the detail of how events are configured, more so than what I showed you during our time together today, you have full and free access to our training video library. It is an audio-video library. Each course runs only about 14 to 16 minutes, so they're very short, very specific, easily digestible. Even though you have not purchased Alerts and Workflow as yet, you do have access to all of these resources, so by all means, help yourself. Okay, Dave, anything else?
One more question from Becky here. Since this is a replacement for the alerts that they already have, is there a discounted price for upgrading?
Even better than that, Becky, there's actually a free upgrade. If you do currently own, and by the way, Becky, thank you very much for asking that question. I was certainly remiss in not mentioning it automatically. If you already own what used to be referred to as Abra Alerts, which is the old alerts technology for Sage Abra, Sage HRMS, you are entitled to a free upgrade to Sage Alerts and Workflow. That free upgrade gives you what we refer to as the Alerts Edition. That was the $17.99 edition that was referenced in the PowerPoint. But by all means, contact the folks at Delphia. They'll give you the full details of that free upgrade program. Yeah, it's a very nice deal, because if you've invested in alerts already, then certainly you deserve that upgrade offer to migrate to Sage Alerts and Workflow.
All right, and I think that's all the questions we have for today. Don, if you want to wrap us up.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, David. I appreciate it, and I want to convey my thanks to everyone else involved participating in today's webinar. If you do have any questions as follow-up, I know there were some in the chat session, but let me just go to our very last slide, which is right here. So for any additional follow-up questions that you might have, we certainly do encourage you to speak with David and his colleagues at Delphia Consulting. It's very important for you to know that Delphia is a certified, authorized business partner of both Sage and Vineyardsoft Corporation, the developer of Sage Alerts and Workflow. So you'll be in very good hands with Delphia. They can help you download and try out Alerts and Workflow. You see their contact information on the current slide, both phone number and web address. So by all means, do feel free to follow up with them. And my email and phone number is also on the slide. Again, I'm Don Farber with Vineyardsoft, so if you do have any additional follow-up questions, feel free to either email that address or call me on my direct extension. So with that, David, I will convey my thanks to yours and to everyone on today's call and say we very much look forward to working with you. Thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, everybody, for today, and we'll also send out the copy of the slides following the webinar.
Excellent. Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.